right, in this overview, I'm going to show you just the basics of how to make an InDesign file, which will help you when you use the templates for the actual newspaper layout. So this is what you'll see when you open up InDesign right away. You can see that you have kind of these preset options, and then you have some older files if you've used those before. So that's where you could maybe find old newspaper pages if you had been working on those prior. So what we're going to do though, just for practice right now, is go to create new, and we're going to say tabloid. And then one of the things, if you create a new document, you want to do first of all is over on the right, just name it. So you might call this practice and then your last name here. And then you want to set, instead of picas, you want to set this to inches, because that's a lot easier to understand. We always work in 11 by 17, 11 being the width, 17 being the height. And you'll just start with one page here, and columns, that's fine, just one. Facing pages, that's all good. And you're going to say create. When your document's created, you're going to see some things that are helpful here. One is at the top, you have a ruler that goes from 0 to 11 inches, so you know it's the right size. If you ever see this say something like 0 to 66, that means you're in picas and not inches, and that could be confusing to you. Then over on the left side, you also have your inches. That goes down to 17, so we know our space is correct. Now, what you'll see over on the left here are some selection tools. The primary one you're going to use is this first one. It's the dark black arrow. You can also go to that quickly by just tapping V as in Victor on your keyboard. You also have this lighter one, which is the direct selection tool. We won't use that too much initially, but eventually I'll show you what that's about. After that, you have just some different kind of tools as you go through. The most important ones that we're going to think about right away is this rectangle frame tool, and then the text type tool, and also this just general rectangle tool. So the first thing you want to think about with a newspaper is you're going to want to put in text. So we select our type tool, and we can left click and drag, and you can make basically a box, and that box is where any text can go. Now you can right click from that and say that you want to add any kind of placeholder text. So you click on fill with placeholder text, and it'll fill in a whole bunch of text, so you can kind of see what you want to have there. I'm just going to switch over to this Essentials Classic, because I think this is what you're going to see is Essentials Classic. If you ever notice your screen looks a little weird, you want to go up to this little drop down and say Essentials or Essentials Classic. So in Essentials Classic, the nice thing is I can now see all of my different type and text and all that kind of stuff. Now you might say, this seems really small, so what do I do about that? What you can do is hold down Alt on your keyboard and scroll your wheel on your mouse. It really helps to have a scroll wheel, and you can get in really close on this. You can get all the way into the letter kind of level. The other way you can do that is you can click on this zoom tool. So now I can scroll in. So I'm going to scroll in just a little bit so I can kind of see what I'm working with. You'll notice that the writing is in kind of like this bizarre Latin writing, and that's so that when you place this in a newspaper as placeholder text, you don't publish it thinking it's just filler text, because you'll see it and be like, oh, that's not our actual article. So this is intentional for that reason. Then of course, it's just like any text box. You can drag the box around using that black arrow. Again, that shortcut V. You can also grab these little tabs on the side and shrink it or extend it. You can extend it from the bottom, and you can also kind of extend it and shrink it from the sides. Now, if you move your cursor out just a little bit from that bottom corner, you can also rotate it, which we don't do very often, but you never know, something creative you might want to do there. If you ever mess up, like I didn't like that rotation I just did, if I do Control Z, I can undo that. And Control Z works quite a ways back, but you just got to be careful you don't go too far before what you mess up is not fixable at that point. Okay, so in here I have a couple other options for text. Number one, I need to highlight something, and then I can increase font sizes or decrease. I can also just type that straight into here or do a drop down. I can also just choose different texts. The text we always use for our work is Franklin Gothic. Where are you? There we go. Franklin Gothic book, or Demicond is for bold. So when we bold names. So Franklin Gothic book is what we always use for our font. And then if we want to bold a name, we do Franklin Gothic Demi Bold, which you can also just type in. So typing in Frank and you get that. And there we go. Now it's bolded there, so you can see that bold differentiation. Now at times, what you might also want to do is actually like tighten up how the text looks. And that's done with these tools over here. So let's say I need to tighten up my words because it doesn't quite fit right on the page. I can go down in size, or I can also increase it in size. Our rule of thumb there is never go over 60 or negative 60 there. And really what you'd want to shoot for is to try to keep it consistent over your whole page. I would prefer you try to fix these boxes and figure out how those boxes might work rather than just constantly messing with the sizing of the fonts. Okay, then of course we have different abilities to justify things. For journalism, the one we want to use is this one because it justifies it all the way to the right and to the left. In a normal English paper or something, you might use this one, right? And it doesn't justify it, but for us, we want to justify it all the way to the column. So those are our options there as well. Now, the next thing we want to think about within this area is that we actually want to create columns. You'll notice there's these two tabs. So if I have this whole box here, I don't want to run a text box all the way across the page. It doesn't look very good. It's tough to read. So I want to make columns. And over on the left, there's this paragraph button. If I go to that paragraph button, you'll notice I have those all the ways to justify. I can also create indents here. And I can create a larger first letter, which we always do. So let's say this is my first line, and I want to create a larger first letter. What I can do is go up to 3. That's our standard. So now that's the large first letter, and it continues writing after that. Now, if I want to create columns, I can go all the way over to the right here, and this guy says 1 column. If I click up, it perfectly spaces multiple columns in that area. Our rule of thumb is that we generally have 5 columns across the page for any article. So it runs 5 columns across. Well, you can see that here if I zoom out, what that looks like. It starts to look more like a newspaper rather than just a whole bunch of text on the page. If you ever want to move yourself around, you can tap H, that's the hand tool, and it can kind of pull it around. I accidentally made a box here, so let's delete that. Okay, so that's a lot of the text stuff you'll do. There's other kind of nuances and intricacies that you'd want to learn, but generally those are the main tools. To edit any text, you need to be on the text tool or the type tool, and that's shortcut T. So if you're ever outside of it, let's say you have your selection tool grabbed, and you're like, how do I type in here? Typically, if you double click, it'll actually give you the type tool. It knows what you want. But you can also just tap T, and then you can start typing in there. And you'll notice my menu changes when I have T selected. So again, the key things here, columns, and then that capital letter at the beginning of a paragraph, or excuse me, at the beginning of a text box. And then up in the characters, you can actually change how the font looks. You can always do Control A to select all, and that helps you especially if you're trying to say, I want it all to look a similar font here. And if you want to space out everything, you can do that also by doing Control A to select all. Okay, so that's how to use font with InDesign. I'm going to stop this video, and in the next video, I'll show you how to do pictures.